In the quiet town of Riverdale, 1876, a mistaken letter changed two lives forever. Catherine Mitchell, a blind piano teacher from Boston, accidentally received a reply meant for another woman with a similar name. James Sullivan, a widowed father of twin boys in Montana, had no idea the woman arriving on the stagecoach couldn't see. Their unexpected meeting would challenge everything they thought they wanted and show them exactly what they needed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. This is the story of how fate's cruelest mistakes sometimes turn out to be its greatest blessings, and how a woman who had resigned herself to darkness found light in the most unexpected place. The stagecoach lurched violently as it hit another deep rut in the dusty Montana road. Catherine Mitchell clutched her worn leather satchel tighter against her chest and steadied herself against the wooden seat. The journey from Boston had been grueling enough, but these final miles were proving the most punishing. "First time out west, miss?" a friendly voice asked from across the coach. Catherine turned toward the sound, her unseeing eyes hidden behind small, tinted spectacles. "Is it that obvious?" she asked with a slight smile. "Most folks who've lived here a while know to wear clothes that don't show the dust so much," the man explained, his voice kind. "That fine blue traveling dress of yours is practically painted with our Montana soil now." Catherine ran her fingers along the fabric of her once pristine dress. It had been crisp and clean when she'd boarded the train in Boston 3 weeks ago. She'd chosen it carefully, asking her sister to describe its appearance in detail. "I suppose I have a lot to learn," she admitted. The truth was, Catherine had barely given thought to practical matters like appropriate clothing when she had packed her trunks. Her mind had been filled with apprehension about meeting James Sullivan, the man whose letters had somehow found their way to her over the past 6 months. Letters meant for another Catherine Mitchell. "Riverdale's just up ahead, folks," the driver called down. "We'll be stopping at Mason's General Store." Catherine's heart quickened. After months of correspondence and weeks of travel, she was finally here. And she still hadn't told James Sullivan about her blindness. The mistaken identity had been clear to her from his first letter. He had written thinking she was the Catherine Mitchell who had placed an advertisement seeking a husband in the Western Territories. But something in his honest, thoughtful words had touched her deeply, and she had responded as herself. Their letters had grown increasingly affectionate, and when he proposed marriage, writing of his lonely ranch and twin 5-year-old boys who needed a mother, Catherine had accepted. Only later did she realize she had never explicitly mentioned her blindness, and now she feared his reaction. "Miss Mitchell?" A deep voice addressed her as the stagecoach door opened. "I'm Elias Mason, owner of the general store. Mr. Sullivan asked me to watch for you." "Yes, that's me," she replied, extending her hand slightly off-center. Mr. Mason gently redirected her hand and shook it. There was a moment of awkward silence before he said, "Miss Mitchell, I don't mean to be forward, but can you see?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "No, Mr. Mason, I cannot," Catherine answered evenly. "I've been blind since I was 12. An illness took my sight." She paused. "I take it Mr. Sullivan didn't mention this in his instructions to you?" Mason cleared his throat uncomfortably. "No, miss, he did not. In fact, he described you quite differently. Said you had auburn hair and green eyes, according to the photograph you sent." Catherine's heart sank. Just as she had feared. "I have dark brown hair, and I'm told my eyes are brown as well. It seems there's been a misunderstanding. You see, there must be another Catherine Mitchell, the one who advertised for a husband. Our letters got crossed somehow, and by the time I realized, She trailed off, unsure how to explain that she had knowingly continued the correspondence despite the mistaken identity. "Well, this is unexpected," Mason said diplomatically. "Mr. Sullivan's ranch is about 5 miles outside of town. He was planning to come meet you tomorrow, after you'd had a chance to rest from your journey. Perhaps it would be best if I stayed at the local boarding house tonight," Catherine suggested. "And you could send word to Mr. Sullivan explaining the situation. He may wish to reconsider his proposal." "Mrs. Parker's boarding house is just down the street," Mason agreed. "I'll have your trunks delivered there. But Miss Mitchell, if you don't mind my asking, how did you manage such a journey alone?" Catherine straightened her shoulders slightly. "I've been blind for 15 years, Mr. Mason. I've learned to navigate the world. The railroad staff were very accommodating, and I find most people are kind when asked for assistance. What she didn't mention was the fear that had accompanied her every step of the journey. The terror of being in unknown spaces, the vulnerability of relying on strangers, the constant anxiety that she would become hopelessly lost or taken advantage of. But Catherine had long ago learned that showing such vulnerability only invited pity, and pity was something she could not abide. As Mason escorted her to the boarding house, Catherine's mind raced. What would James Sullivan think when he learned the truth? Would he be angry? Would he send her back east immediately? She had spent nearly all her savings on this journey, on the hope that the connection they had formed through their letters was strong enough to overcome the deception, though she hadn't intended it as such. Mrs. Parker, the boarding house proprietor, was a brisk, efficient woman who seemed unfazed by Catherine's blindness. "Room 3, top of the stairs, turn right, supper's at 6. Bathrooms at the end of the hall. I've got a girl who can help you with anything you need. Her name's Lucy." "Thank you, Mrs. Parker," Catherine replied, relieved at the woman's practical approach. Once alone in her room, Catherine carefully explored the space, memorizing the location of each piece of furniture by touch. The bed was firm but comfortable, the washstand adequately stocked, the window, which she could feel the breeze from, overlooking what must be the main street based on the sounds drifting up. She unpacked her most immediate necessities, including her prized possession, a small music box that played Beethoven's Für Elise. It had been a gift from her father before his death, and its familiar melody never failed to comfort her. Catherine wound it now, letting the delicate notes fill the small room. As the music played, she sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment of doubt. Had she been foolish to come all this way? To risk so much on a connection formed through words on paper, words she couldn't even read herself, but had her sister read aloud to her? James Sullivan's letters had described a hard-working man, devoted to his young sons, honest about the challenges of ranch life, but also about his loneliness since his wife's death 2 years prior. He had written of simple things, the way the Montana sunset painted the mountains, how his boys had learned to ride ponies, the garden he tried, and failed, to maintain. And he had written of more complicated matters, his grief, his fears for his sons growing up without a mother's influence, his hope that he might find partnership again. Catherine had responded with equal honesty, or so she had thought. She had written of her life in Boston, teaching piano to support herself after her parents' deaths. She had described the music she loved, the books her sister read to her, the challenges and triumphs of her days. But she had never explicitly stated that she was blind, perhaps because in her mind it was so fundamental to her existence that she assumed it was evident in her words. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Mitchell? It's Lucy. Mrs. Parker sent me to help you get settled." Lucy turned out to be a chatty 15-year-old whose forthright manner Catherine found refreshing. "So you came all the way from Boston to marry Mr. Sullivan. That's romantic, I think, though most folks around here think mail-order brides are a desperate business. But Mr. Sullivan's a good man. His wife Sarah died birthing those twin boys. Terrible sad. He's raised them alone all this time. Lucy, did Mr. Sullivan ever mention what he knew about me? About his expectations?" Catherine asked carefully. "Well, he showed my pa your photograph once. Said you had pretty eyes." "Oh." Lucy stopped abruptly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "It's all right," Catherine assured her. "That confirms what I suspected. The photograph wasn't me. There's been a mistake." "Oh dear," Lucy said. "What will you do?" "I'll meet with Mr. Sullivan tomorrow and explain everything. Then I suppose I'll need to find work until I can save enough to return to Boston." "What kind of work can you do?" Lucy asked bluntly. "I'm a piano teacher," Catherine replied. "A good one. I can play most pieces by ear after hearing them once." "Well, there's a piano at the church, and Mrs. Winters had been teaching some of the children before her arthritis got too bad. Perhaps you could take over her students?" Catherine felt a small spark of hope. "Perhaps." "Thank you, Lucy." After supper, Catherine sat in the small parlor of the boarding house, where Mrs. Parker had mentioned there was a piano. It was badly out of tune, but Catherine didn't mind. Her fingers found the keys by memory, and she began to play softly, a Chopin nocturne that had always soothed her. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't hear someone enter the room until a deep voice spoke. That's beautiful. I haven't heard playing like that since I was back east. Catherine's hands froze on the keys. I'm sorry, I didn't realize anyone was here. No need to apologize. I'm James Sullivan. Catherine's heart leapt into her throat. Mr. Sullivan? I thought, Mr. Mason said you wouldn't be coming until tomorrow. I couldn't wait, he admitted. Not after waiting 6 months already. Mason sent word there'd been some kind of mix-up, but he was vague about the details. Catherine stood, turning toward his voice. Yes, there has been a misunderstanding. I'm Catherine Mitchell, but I'm not the Catherine Mitchell you've been corresponding with. I'm not the woman in the photograph. There was a pause, and Catherine wished desperately that she could see his expression. Was he angry? Disappointed? I can see that, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. You're blind. Yes, she confirmed. I have been since I was 12. Scarlet fever. Our letters got crossed somehow. I received yours by mistake, but once we began corresponding, I didn't correct the misunderstanding. I should have, and I'm sorry for that. So all the letters I received, those were actually from you? He asked. Yes. Every word I wrote was true, Mr. Sullivan, except for my failure to mention my blindness. Another pause, longer this time. Catherine stood perfectly still, her hands clasped tightly before her. May I ask you something, Miss Mitchell? He finally said. Of course. The 4th letter I sent, do you recall what I wrote about? Catherine smiled slightly. You wrote about a thunderstorm, how your boys were frightened, and you taught them to count the seconds between lightning and thunder to know how far away it was. You wrote about sitting on the porch afterward, watching the rain drip from the eaves and smelling the freshly washed earth. She could hear him take a step closer. And my 9th letter? You described your wife's garden, how you'd tried to maintain it after she died. But the only thing that thrived was the lavender, which you said was fitting because it was her favorite. Those were private thoughts, he said quietly. Things I'd never told anyone. I know, Catherine replied. I honored the trust you placed in me, even if it was mistakenly given. Your letters became very important to me, Mr. Sullivan. I look forward to them more than I can express. But you came here knowing this was all based on a misunderstanding, he said, an edge entering his voice. What did you expect would happen? Catherine lifted her chin. I expected you would be shocked and likely angry. I expected you might send me away immediately, but I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that the connection we formed through our letters might be real enough that you would at least consider giving me a chance. A chance? He sounded incredulous. Miss Mitchell, I need a wife who can help run a ranch, who can cook and clean and mind 2 rambunctious boys. I need someone who can see danger coming and respond to it. This isn't Boston with its paved streets and conveniences. Each word was like a blow, though Catherine had anticipated them. I understand, she said stiffly. I apologize for the deception, and for wasting your time. I'll make arrangements to return east as soon as possible. She moved a step around him, but his hand caught her arm gently. Wait. I didn't say I was sending you back. You made it quite clear that I'm not what you need, Catherine replied, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. I said what I thought I needed, he corrected, but I've learned that what I think I need and what God provides aren't always the same thing. What are you saying, Mr. Sullivan? Quote, I'm saying that I'd like to understand how this happened, and I'd like to know more about you, the real you, not who I imagined from those letters and a photograph of a stranger. Catherine felt a flutter of hope. I would like that very much. Then join me for breakfast tomorrow, here at the boarding house, 8 o'clock. We'll talk, and then we'll see. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. James, he corrected. After all, we've been writing to each other for 6 months. After he left, Catherine returned to the piano, her fingers trembling slightly as they found the keys. She began to play again, this time a piece she had composed herself during the long journey west. It was full of both apprehension and hope, much like her current state of mind. She had expected anger, perhaps even contempt. But instead, James Sullivan had offered breakfast and conversation. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was an opportunity. And Catherine had learned long ago to make the most of every opportunity life afforded her. The next morning, Catherine dressed with particular care, choosing a simple but elegant blue dress that her sister had assured her brought out the rich brown of her hair. Lucy helped her arrange her hair in a neat chignon and described how she looked. "You're ever so pretty, Miss Mitchell," the girl declared. "Not what folks expect when they think of a blind person. You look right at people when they talk, and your eyes are such a nice brown. Not cloudy or strange like old Mr. Jenkins who lost his sight in the war." "Thank you, Lucy," Catherine replied with a smile. "Though I'm not sure looking normal is particularly an achievement." "Well, it might help with Mr. Sullivan," Lucy said pragmatically. "Men can be shallow creatures, my ma always says." Catherine laughed, grateful for the moment of levity before what promised to be a difficult conversation. James Sullivan was already waiting in the boarding house dining room when Catherine came downstairs, Lucy guiding her with a light touch on her elbow. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell," he greeted her. "Good morning, Mr. Sullivan. James," she corrected herself. Lucy helped Catherine to her seat and then discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone in the dining room. Mrs. Parker had apparently decided to give them privacy, for which Catherine was grateful. "Did you sleep well?" James asked. "As well as can be expected," Catherine replied honestly. "And you? Did you have to travel far this morning?" "My ranch is about an hour's ride from town," he said. "I stayed with a friend last night after I met you." There was an awkward pause before Catherine spoke again. "I want to apologize again for the misunderstanding. I should have been more explicit in my letters." "I've been thinking about that," James said. "Looking back at your letters, there were clues I missed. You never directly referenced the photograph I sent of myself and the boys. You described music in such vivid detail, but were more vague about visual things. And you mentioned having things read to you, which I assumed meant you enjoyed being pampered." Catherine smiled ruefully. "When one sense is lost, the others compensate. I experience the world through sound, touch, smell, and taste. In my letters, I wrote about what was most real to me." "Tell me about your life in Boston," James requested as Mrs. Parker brought them coffee and a simple breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. Catherine described her work as a piano teacher, how she had built up a respectable clientele after her parents' deaths left her with little income. She explained how she navigated the city she had known since childhood, the adaptations she had made to manage her household with her sister's occasional help. "What made you respond to my letter when you realized it wasn't meant for you?" James asked. Catherine hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. Curiosity at first, then genuine interest. "Your words were thoughtful, not what I expected from a rancher seeking a mail-order bride. You wrote about your sons with such love, about the land with such appreciation. When I received your second letter, I knew I should explain the mistake, but I was afraid you would stop writing. And when I proposed marriage? I knew it was reckless to accept," she admitted. "But my life in Boston had become lonely. My sister recently married and moved to Philadelphia. My students were dear to me, but at the end of each day, I returned to an empty house. Your letters offered a different life, one with purpose beyond myself, with family. But surely you must have realized that ranch life would be challenging for someone with your condition." "My blindness," Catherine supplied the word he seemed reluctant to use. "Yes, I considered that. But I've never let my blindness define what I can and cannot do, James. I've learned to adapt. I would have found ways to contribute to your household, to be a mother to your boys." James was quiet for a moment, and Catherine could hear him stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "My sons are the most important thing in my life," he finally said. "After their mother died, I promised them, and myself, that I would do whatever it took to give them a good life. They're fortunate to have such a devoted father," Catherine said softly. "They need a mother," James continued. "Someone who can teach them things I can't, who can provide the gentleness and patience I sometimes lack." When I placed that advertisement, I was thinking practically. A partnership, like you said in your letter. And now? Catherine asked, her heart beating faster. Now I don't know what to think, he admitted. The woman I believed I was corresponding with doesn't exist. Yet the words that moved me, the thoughts that connected with mine, those were real. Those were yours. Catherine reached hesitantly across the table, and James, understanding her intention, placed his hand under hers. His palm was calloused and warm. "May I make a suggestion?" she asked. "Please do." "Give me 2 weeks," Catherine proposed. "Let me stay in Riverdale for 2 weeks. Get to know me, the real me, not the person you imagine from those letters. Let me meet your sons. At the end of that time, if you decide I'm not suitable as a wife and mother, I'll return to Boston with no hard feelings." James was quiet for so long that Catherine began to fear he would refuse. Finally, he squeezed her hand gently. 2 weeks, he agreed. "But I need to be clear about something, Catherine. My boys have already lost one mother. I won't let them get attached to another woman who might disappear from their lives." "I understand," Catherine said. "I won't do anything to confuse or hurt them." "All right, then. I'll speak with Reverend Thomas about the church piano. If Mrs. Winters agrees, perhaps you could take over her students temporarily. That would give you a reason to stay in town beyond just our arrangement." "Thank you, James." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "I haven't agreed to anything more than 2 weeks for us to understand this unusual situation." But there was a warmth in his voice that gave Catherine hope. Hope that perhaps this misunderstanding might yet lead to the connection she had dreamed of during those long months of correspondence. As they finished breakfast, James asked, "Would you like to meet my boys today? They're staying with my foreman's wife while I'm in town." "I would like that very much," Catherine replied, her heart filling with both excitement and apprehension. She had come west seeking a new beginning, and despite the complications and misunderstandings, she couldn't help feeling that something important was starting. Something neither she nor James Sullivan could have anticipated when their letters first crossed paths months ago. After breakfast, James escorted Catherine from the boarding house. The morning air was crisp and filled with unfamiliar scents: wood smoke, dust, and something green and wild that Catherine couldn't identify. "My wagon's just down the street," James said, gently guiding her with a light touch at her elbow. "The boys are at my foreman's house on the edge of town. It's about a 10-minute ride." Catherine nodded, focusing on the sounds around her to orient herself. Horses, hooves on packed dirt, distant hammering from what must be a blacksmith, women's voices chatting from a nearby porch. Riverdale was alive in ways both familiar and foreign to her Boston-trained ears. "People are watching us," she said quietly. James chuckled. "News travels fast in small towns. Everyone knew I was expecting a mail-order bride. I imagine they're curious about you." "And disappointed, perhaps," Catherine suggested, tilting her face toward him. "Surprised, I'd say. But Riverdale's a decent place. Folks here have faced enough hardships that they don't tend to judge others too harshly." He helped her into the wagon with careful hands, making sure she was seated securely before climbing in beside her. The bench was worn smooth from years of use, and Catherine ran her fingers along its edge, building a mental picture of this conveyance that would likely become familiar. As they rode, James described the town they were passing through. The general store they'd just left behind, the small church with its white steeple, the schoolhouse where his boys would start attending in the fall, the saloon that he assured her was reasonably respectable as such establishments go. Catherine appreciated his descriptions, which were more detailed than most sighted people tended to offer. "You paint a clear picture," she said. "I've learned to notice details," he replied. "When Sarah, my wife, died, it was as if I started seeing things differently. The world became sharper somehow. I had to pay attention to everything to keep the boys safe." "How old were they when she died?" "Just 3, James answered, his voice softening. "Too young to really remember her now, which breaks my heart. They're 5 now, Michael and Matthew. Michael's older by 12 minutes, and he never lets his brother forget it." Catherine smiled at the fondness in his voice. "Are they identical?" "Yes, though as their father I can tell them apart easily. Matthew has a small birthmark behind his right ear, and Michael's smile is slightly crooked. But it's their personalities that truly distinguish them. Michael is bold, always the first to try something new. Matthew is thoughtful, watches carefully before he acts." The wagon turned, and Catherine felt the road change beneath them from the relatively smooth main street to a rougher path. She gripped the seat more tightly. "We're heading to the Peterson place now," James explained. "Tom Peterson is my foreman, and his wife Ada has been a godsend with the boys. They have 3 children of their own, so it's quite the lively household." Catherine's stomach tightened with nervousness. Meeting James's sons felt momentous. These were children who might become her stepsons, who might call her mother someday, or who might be told she was just a visitor who would soon return east. "James," she said hesitantly, "how have you explained my visit to your sons?" He was quiet for a moment. "I told them that you were a friend who might be staying nearby for a while. I didn't want to promise them anything." "Of course," Catherine nodded, understanding but still feeling a twinge of disappointment. "That's sensible." The wagon slowed, then came to a stop. "We're here," James announced. Catherine could hear children's voices in the distance, shouts and laughter that made her smile despite her nerves. James helped her down from the wagon, then hesitated. "Catherine, there's something I should mention. The Petersons don't know about the misunderstanding. They think you're the woman from the photograph." "I see," Catherine said, straightening her shoulders. "Well, we'll simply have to explain, won't we?" James led her toward the house, the sounds of children growing louder. Then, a woman's voice called out, "James, we weren't expecting you until later." Footsteps approached, and a warm, motherly voice addressed Catherine. "You must be Miss Mitchell. Oh, we've heard so much about you. I'm Ada Peterson." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Peterson," Catherine replied, extending her hand. There was a brief pause, and Catherine could sense the moment Ada noticed her blindness, the subtle shift in energy, the slight intake of breath. "Ada," James said quietly, "there's been a misunderstanding that I'll explain later, but yes, this is Catherine Mitchell." To her credit, Ada recovered quickly. "Well, you're most welcome here, Miss Mitchell. The boys have been so excited since they heard their father was bringing someone special to meet them." Before Catherine could respond, the pounding of small feet announced the arrival of children, and 2 identical voices shouted in unison, "Pa, you're back." "There are my boys," James said, his voice warming. Catherine heard the sounds of bodies colliding as the twins apparently launched themselves at their father. "Michael, Matthew, I want you to meet Miss Mitchell. She's the friend I told you about." There was a curious silence, and Catherine imagined the boys studying her with the unabashed directness of children. She smiled and knelt down, bringing herself to what she hoped was their eye level. "Hello, Michael and Matthew. Your father has told me so much about you. I'm very happy to meet you." "Why do you wear those glasses?" one of the boys asked bluntly. "It's not even sunny." "Matthew," James admonished gently, "remember your manners." "It's all right," Catherine assured him. "Matthew, I wear these glasses because my eyes are sensitive. I can't see the way you can." "You're blind?" the same voice asked, with the frankness of childhood. "Yes, I am. Can I touch your face?" This was a different voice. "Michael?" Catherine presumed. "That's how blind people see in the stories." Catherine smiled. "Yes, you may." Small fingers, slightly sticky, carefully explored her features. "You're pretty," Michael declared, "but you don't look like the picture Pa showed us." Catherine felt James stiffen beside her, but before he could speak, she replied honestly, "No, I imagine I don't. There was a mistake with the photograph." "Come now, boys," Ada interjected smoothly. "Why don't you show Miss Mitchell your fort while I speak with your father? Be gentle, mind you." 2 small hands slipped into Catherine's. "We'll be your eyes," Matthew said seriously. "Pa says we have to be gentlemen." "I'll be right here," James assured her, a note of worry in his voice. "We'll be fine," Catherine replied confidently, allowing the twins to lead her away. The boys guided her carefully across what felt like a yard, warning her about a rock here, a dip there. They led her to what they proudly described as their fort, which seemed to be constructed of old crates and blankets against a large tree. "You have to duck to get in," Michael instructed, still holding her hand. "It's not very big, but we can all fit." Catherine carefully navigated the entrance and found herself in a small, enclosed space that smelled of earth, wood, and little boys. "This is wonderful," she said sincerely. "You built this yourselves?" "Pa helped with the big parts," Matthew admitted, "but we did the rest." It's our special place, Michael added. We don't let just anybody in. Then I'm honored, Catherine replied, genuinely touched. For the next half hour, the twins chattered freely, telling her about their life on the ranch, their pony named Freckles, the time Michael fell into the creek and Matthew had to run for help, and 100 other childhood adventures. Catherine listened attentively, asking questions and building a picture of their world in her mind. Miss Mitchell, Matthew said suddenly, are you going to be our new ma? The directness of the question took Catherine's breath away. Well, that's something your father and I are still discussing. We asked for a ma for Christmas, Michael confided. Pa said it wasn't something Santa could bring, but he was looking. I see, Catherine replied softly. And how would you feel about having a new mother? The boys were quiet for a moment, thinking. Would you read us stories? Matthew asked. I can't read from books the way you're used to, Catherine explained. But I know many stories by heart, and I could tell them to you. Could you teach us piano? Michael asked. We heard you playing at the boarding house. Pa took us to listen outside the window last night. Catherine smiled, surprised and pleased. Yes, I could teach you piano if you'd like. Would you make us eat vegetables? Matthew asked suspiciously. Catherine laughed. Probably yes. That's what we thought, he sighed dramatically. Their conversation was interrupted by James calling their names. Boys? Miss Mitchell? Ada's got lemonade ready. The twins scrambled out of the fort, then remembered to help Catherine. Their small hands guided her with a surprising gentleness that touched her heart. Back at the house, Catherine could sense a different atmosphere. Ada was unnaturally bright in her conversation, and James was quieter than before. She guessed that he had explained the situation, and Ada was processing this unexpected development. After lemonade and cookies, James announced it was time to take Catherine back to town. The boys protested vigorously. But Pa, we were going to show Miss Mitchell our pony, Michael objected. And the kittens in the barn, Matthew added. Another day, James promised. Miss Mitchell is tired from her journey. Reluctantly, the twins said goodbye, each giving Catherine a swift, impulsive hug that nearly brought tears to her eyes. As they rode back toward town, Catherine was quiet, reflecting on the meeting. They're wonderful boys, she finally said. You've done a remarkable job raising them. They took to you, James observed. They're usually more reserved with strangers. Children often are more accepting of differences than adults, Catherine replied. To them, my blindness is just another interesting feature, like your foreman's beard or Mrs. Peterson's spectacles. James was silent for a moment. I explained everything to Ada, he said. She was shocked, of course, but she's a practical woman. Said I should be thanking my lucky stars that the real Catherine Mitchell turned out to be someone decent and not an imposter with ill intentions. Catherine laughed softly. I like her. She did have concerns about the ranch, James continued, his voice more serious. Practical concerns that I share. About my ability to function in that environment, Catherine surmised. Yes. It's not an easy life, Catherine. The house is simple, the work is constant, and the dangers are real. Snakes, steep drops, unpredictable livestock, the isolation if something were to happen. I understand, Catherine said, though her heart sank at the doubt in his voice. I won't pretend it wouldn't be challenging. But James, I've spent 15 years adapting to a world not designed for people without sight. I've learned to cook without burning myself, to navigate unfamiliar spaces, to build a life of independence. A life in Boston, he pointed out, with paved streets and neighbors close by. Yes, she acknowledged. But the principles are the same. I learn the environment. I establish routines. I find ways to accomplish what needs doing. I'm not afraid of hard work or challenges. They had reached the boarding house, and James helped her down from the wagon. I need to return to the ranch this afternoon, he said. There's work that can't wait. But I'll come back to town tomorrow. In the meantime, I've spoken with Reverend Thomas, and he's eager to meet you. Mrs. Winters has been wanting to retire from teaching piano for months. Thank you, Catherine said sincerely. That was thoughtful of you, James cleared his throat. It seemed the least I could do, given the circumstances. And the boys will be with me tomorrow. They've already asked if they can see you again. A warmth spread through Catherine's chest. I'd like that very much. Until tomorrow, then, James said, and she could hear him shift his weight, as if uncertain of the proper farewell. Finally, he simply touched her hand briefly. Good day, Catherine. Good day, James, she replied, listening to his footsteps retreat and the wagon pull away before turning to enter the boarding house. Lucy was waiting just inside, practically bouncing with curiosity. Well, how did it go? Did you meet the twins? What did Mr. Sullivan say? Is the wedding still on? Catherine couldn't help but laugh at the girl's enthusiasm. One question at a time, Lucy. Yes, I met the twins, and they're delightful. As for the wedding? She sighed. That remains to be seen. Mr. Sullivan and I have agreed to a 2-week period to get to know one another properly. 2 weeks isn't very long, Lucy observed as she helped Catherine remove her bonnet. No, it isn't, Catherine agreed. But it's enough time to determine if what we felt through our letters has any basis in reality. I think it's romantic, Lucy declared. Like a story in a dime novel. Let's hope it has a happy ending then, Catherine replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The doubts James had expressed about ranch life weighed on her mind. What if, despite their connection through letters, the practical challenges proved insurmountable? That afternoon, Catherine met with Reverend Thomas at the church. The Reverend was a jovial man with a booming voice who expressed no surprise at her blindness. Apparently news traveled fast in Riverdale. Mrs. Winters has been praying for someone to take over her students, he told Catherine as he showed her to the piano in the church sanctuary. Her hands pain her something terrible these days. We've got 8 students currently, ranging from beginners to intermediate. Nothing like your Boston students, I imagine, but eager learners. The piano was out of tune but had a sweet tone that Catherine appreciated as she played a simple piece to demonstrate her skills. Magnificent, the Reverend declared. Simply magnificent. Mrs. Winters will be thrilled. She can bring the students by tomorrow to meet you, if that suits. Catherine agreed, grateful for the opportunity to establish herself in the community, however temporarily. If things with James didn't work out, she would need income to save for her return journey east. The next day brought both Mrs. Winters and her students, 4 girls and 4 boys between the ages of 8 and 16. The elderly piano teacher was gracious and clearly relieved to find a qualified replacement. These young ones deserve better than my gnarled old hands can give them now, she told Catherine. And between us, this town needs more culture. Most folks here wouldn't know Mozart from a mountain lion's yowl. Catherine laughed and assured her that she would do her best to elevate Riverdale's musical appreciation. The students seemed intrigued rather than put off by her blindness, especially after she demonstrated how she could play complex pieces from memory. By the time James arrived with the twins that afternoon, Catherine was feeling more settled. Having meaningful work, even temporarily, gave her a sense of purpose and belonging that eased her anxiety about the future. The boys burst into the church where she was finishing a lesson with her youngest student, calling her name with an enthusiasm that warmed her heart. Miss Mitchell, Pa brought us to town and said we could see you, Michael announced. We brought something for you, Matthew added more shyly. James's footsteps followed the boys into the sanctuary. I hope we're not interrupting, he said. Not at all, Catherine assured him, bidding farewell to her student. I was just finishing. What have you brought me, boys? Small hands pressed something into her palm, a smooth, round stone. It's a special rock from the creek, Michael explained. It's blue with white stripes. Matthew found it. I thought you might like how it feels, Matthew said. Since you see with your hands. Catherine closed her fingers around the stone, deeply touched by the thoughtful gift. It's beautiful, she said sincerely, running her thumb over the smooth surface. Thank you, Matthew. I'll keep it with me always. The boys have been talking of nothing but you since yesterday, James said, and Catherine could hear a note of bemused resignation in his voice. They've decided you must come to the ranch to meet Freckles and see their room. We have bunk beds, Michael informed her importantly. I sleep on top because I'm older. By 12 minutes, Matthew interjected with the aggrieved tone of a much-repeated complaint. Catherine laughed. "Well, I would love to visit your ranch. When did you have in mind, James?" "I thought perhaps Sunday after church," he suggested. "If you're amenable. You could join us for the service and then come out to the ranch for dinner. Ada has offered to prepare something special." "That sounds lovely," Catherine agreed, her heart lifting at the invitation. It felt like progress, a step beyond the tentative arrangement they had made the day before. "Can Miss Mitchell ride Freckles?" Michael asked his father. "I don't think," James began. "Actually," Catherine interrupted, "I used to ride quite well before I lost my sight. With someone leading the horse, I could probably manage." "Really?" The surprise in James's voice was evident. "My father believed blindness shouldn't prevent me from experiencing life," Catherine explained. "He was perhaps unusually progressive in that regard." "He sounds like a remarkable man," James said. "He was," Catherine agreed softly. "I miss him every day." A moment of understanding passed between them, two people who had known profound loss. "Well then," James said, clearing his throat, "Sunday it is. And perhaps a very gentle ride on Freckles, if the weather permits." The twins cheered, and Catherine found herself smiling more genuinely than she had in months. For the first time since arriving in Riverdale, she allowed herself to truly hope that this misunderstanding might indeed lead to something wonderful. Over the next few days, Catherine established a routine in Riverdale. Mornings were spent teaching piano lessons at the church, afternoons exploring the small town with Lucy's assistance, learning its layout and meeting its residents. James and the boys visited daily, sometimes just briefly, sometimes for longer excursions. By the time Sunday arrived, Catherine had mapped much of the town in her mind and could navigate the main street independently with her cane. She had also won over most of Mrs. Winter's students and their parents, who were impressed by her skill and teaching methods. Church service in Riverdale was a far cry from the formal, reserved ceremonies of her Boston congregation. The small sanctuary was filled with the sounds of children shuffling, whispered conversations, and the occasional creaking of wooden pews. Reverend Thomas preached with enthusiasm about faith, hope, and love, particularly dwelling on love's capacity to see beyond surface appearances to the heart of a person. Catherine, seated beside James with the twins flanking them, couldn't help but wonder if the sermon had been tailored to their situation. The Reverend was certainly aware of the unusual circumstances that had brought her to Riverdale. After the service, as congregants lingered to socialize, Catherine was introduced to what felt like the entire town. She shook countless hands, remembered dozens of names, and answered the same polite questions about Boston and her journey west, repeatedly. Through it all, James remained by her side, a steady presence that grounded her amid the swirl of new voices and unfamiliar surroundings. His hand occasionally touched her elbow to guide her, and each contact sent a small thrill through her, reminding her of the connection they had formed through their letters. Finally, they made their escape to James's wagon for the ride to the Sullivan ranch. The twins chattered excitedly about all they wanted to show her, while James occasionally interjected with a comment or clarification. As they left the town behind, Catherine felt the air change, becoming fresher and carrying the sense of grass, earth, and livestock. "We're heading west now," James told her. "The ranch is nestled against the foothills. We've got good water from the mountains and decent grazing land. It's not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's ours, free and clear." The pride in his voice was unmistakable, and Catherine smiled. "It sounds beautiful. Will you describe it to me?" As the wagon rolled on, James painted a picture of his land, the creek that ran along the northern boundary, the stand of cottonwoods where the boys had their tree fort, the gentle slope where the house stood facing east to catch the morning sun. He described the house itself, built by his own hands with help from Tom Peterson and other neighbors. A simple two-story structure with a wide porch and 4 rooms downstairs, 3 up. "It's not fancy," he warned. "Nothing like what you must be used to in Boston." "My home in Boston was modest," Catherine assured him. "And a house becomes a home through the people in it, not its furnishings." The wagon slowed, then turned onto what must be the drive to the ranch. "We're here," James announced, a note of nervous anticipation in his voice. As he helped her down from the wagon, Catherine stood still for a moment, taking in the sounds and scents of what might become her home. Birds calling, the distant lowing of cattle, the creek James had described burbling somewhere to her left. The air smelled of pine, grass, and the approaching spring. "Welcome to the Sullivan Ranch," James said quietly. "Thank you for bringing me here," Catherine replied, equally soft, understanding the significance of this invitation. This wasn't just a social call. It was James opening his world to her, allowing her to glimpse the life they might share. The twins, unable to contain their excitement any longer, began tugging at her hands. "Come on, Miss Mitchell. We want to show you everything." And with that, Catherine took her first steps into a future she had never imagined, but now desperately hoped might become hers. "Careful, there's a step up to the porch," James warned as the twins eagerly pulled Catherine forward. She navigated it expertly, having already counted the distance in her mind from the sound of their footsteps. The porch boards creaked pleasantly beneath her feet. Solid, well-built. She could feel the afternoon sun warming the wood through her shoes. The smell of freshly baked bread and something savory, beef stew perhaps, wafted from inside. "Ada came by this morning to help prepare dinner," James explained, confirming Catherine's guess. "She said a man couldn't be trusted to make a proper welcome meal." "It smells wonderful," Catherine said sincerely. "Come inside, come inside," Matthew urged, still holding her hand. The front door opened directly into what James had described as the main living area. Catherine paused in the doorway, building a mental picture from the sounds and scents. The room felt spacious, with a high ceiling. A fire crackled in what must be a stone hearth to her right, warming the air. The wooden floor was smooth beneath her feet. "May I?" she asked, releasing the twins' hands and extending her arms slightly. "Of course," James replied, understanding her need to orient herself. Catherine moved carefully through the space, her fingers trailing over the back of a leather sofa, worn smooth with use, a wooden rocking chair with a handmade quilt draped over it, a low table that must serve as the center of family gatherings, bookshelves built into the wall beside the fireplace, filled with volumes whose spines she traced with gentle fingers. "You have quite a collection," she observed, surprised. "Sarah loved to read," James explained, "and I've continued to collect books for the boys. I read to them every night before bed." Catherine smiled at this evidence of his devotion to his sons' education. "What are you reading currently?" "Robinson Crusoe," Michael piped up. "Pa does all the different voices. Though sometimes he falls asleep before we do," Matthew added with a giggle. James cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed. "Ranching makes for long days." "I would imagine so," Catherine agreed warmly. "Perhaps I could spell you occasionally, though I can't promise to do the voices justice." The twins seemed delighted by this prospect, and Catherine continued her exploration of the room. A piano stood in the corner, a simple upright that had seen better days, but a piano nonetheless. "You didn't mention this," she said, running her fingers reverently over the keys without pressing them down. "It was Sarah's," James said quietly. "She played a little, but after she died, well, it's been silent for 2 years. I keep meaning to have it tuned, but there's never time, and no one to play it anyway." Catherine turned toward his voice. "May I?" "Please." She sat on the bench, positioned her hands, and pressed a key. As she'd suspected, the piano was badly out of tune, but still functional. She played a simple melody, working around the worst of the sour notes, and the music filled the house, perhaps for the first time in years. When she finished, there was a moment of profound silence. Then James said, his voice thick with emotion, "The house has missed that sound." "Miss Mitchell plays much better than Ma did," Michael observed with a child's innocent honesty. "Michael," James admonished gently. "It's all right," Catherine assured him. "Children speak truth as they see it." She turned to Michael. "I've had many years of practice, that's all. Your mother might have become quite accomplished if she'd had the chance." James cleared his throat. "Let me show you the rest of the house." The tour continued, with the twins eagerly pointing out their favorite features while James provided more practical information. The kitchen was spacious by frontier standards, with a large wood stove, a pump for water, and ample workspace. A small dining room adjoined it, centered around a sturdy oak table that James had made himself. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms: the twins' room with the promised bunk beds, James's room, and a small guest room that currently stored trunks and boxes of Sarah's belongings that James hadn't been able to part with. Throughout the tour, Catherine paid careful attention to the layout, counting steps between rooms, noting the placement of furniture, building a map in her mind that would allow her to navigate independently if she stayed. "What do you think?" James asked as they returned downstairs. The twins had raced outside to check on Freckles, giving the adults a rare moment alone. "It's a lovely home," Catherine said sincerely. "Warm, comfortable, clearly built with love and care. But very different from what you are accustomed to," he suggested. "Yes," she acknowledged. "But not in ways that trouble me. The lack of certain conveniences is balanced by other advantages. Such as? Space, fresh air, the sound of that creek I can hear through the windows, the happiness in your sons' voices when they talk about their life here." She hesitated, then added softly, "The possibility of being part of a family again." James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had softened. "Catherine, I need to be honest with you. When I realized there had been a mistake, that you weren't the woman I thought I was corresponding with, and that you were blind, my first instinct was to put you straight back on the stagecoach to Boston." "I know," she said, trying to keep the hurt from her voice. "But then I heard you play the piano," he continued, "and I watched you with my boys, and I remembered the words in your letters, words that moved me, that connected with something in me I thought had died with Sarah." Catherine's heart quickened. "And now? Now I'm confused," he admitted. "My head tells me this is madness. How could a blind woman from Boston possibly adapt to life on a Montana ranch? How could I ask that of you? How could I risk my boys becoming attached to someone who might not be able to stay?" "And your heart?" Catherine asked softly. "My heart remembers the woman who wrote about music as if it were a living thing, who described the feeling of rain on her face with such joy that I found myself looking forward to storms, who responded to my grief with understanding rather than platitudes." His voice dropped lower. "My heart wonders if God sent you to us for a reason, even if it wasn't the reason I expected." Before Catherine could respond, the twins burst back into the house, announcing that Freckles was ready for Miss Mitchell to meet him, and that they were starving. Dinner was a lively affair, with the twins dominating the conversation. James helped Catherine navigate the meal unobtrusively, occasionally guiding her hand to a dish or quietly describing the placement of food on her plate. His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. After the meal, true to his word, James led Catherine to the corral where Freckles, the twins' pony, waited. The animal was gentle, nuzzling Catherine's hand as she offered an apple James had given her. "He likes you," Matthew declared. "Would you like to ride him?" James asked. "The boys have been talking about it nonstop." Catherine hesitated only briefly. "Yes, I would." With James's steady hands to assist her, Catherine mounted the small pony. The familiar feeling of being on horseback brought back a rush of memories. Riding through Boston Common with her father, the freedom and joy of it. James led Freckles around the corral at a walk, the twins running alongside and offering encouragement. Catherine sat straight and confident, her face tilted up to catch the late afternoon sun. "You ride well," James observed. "Your father taught you?" "Yes," Catherine replied. "He believed I should experience everything possible, despite my blindness. He never treated me as fragile or limited. He sounds like a wise man. He was. When I lost my sight, many people, even my mother, thought my life was effectively over, that I would need to be cared for, protected, kept away from anything challenging or potentially dangerous." Catherine's voice grew stronger. "My father refused to accept that. He said God had taken my sight but left me with a sound mind, a strong body, and a determined spirit. It was up to me what I made of those gifts." James was quiet for a moment, leading Freckles through another circuit of the corral. "My father was a hard man," he finally said. "Not cruel, but stern. Unforgiving of weakness. When I told him I wanted to come west, to build something of my own rather than taking over his business, he told me I would fail, that I was too soft for frontier life." "Yet here you are," Catherine observed. "Here I am." James agreed. "With a ranch that supports us, 2 healthy sons, and a reputation as a man who keeps his word. I wonder sometimes what he would say if he could see this place. He would be proud, Catherine said with certainty. How could he not be? After her ride, they sat on the porch while the twins played in the yard. The afternoon was fading into evening, the air cooling, but still pleasant. Birds called to each other, preparing to roost for the night. In the distance, cattle lowed softly. It's so peaceful, Catherine observed. Most days, James agreed. Though we have our share of excitement. Storms that rattle the windows, the occasional ornery bull, coyotes testing the chicken coop's defenses. Life isn't meant to be without challenges, Catherine said thoughtfully. It's facing them that gives us strength and purpose. You truly believe that? I do. When I lost my sight, I could have retreated from the world. Many people expected me to. Instead, I learned to navigate differently, to rely on my other senses, to ask for help when needed, and to offer it when I could. She turned toward him. James, I know you have concerns about my ability to manage here. They're reasonable concerns. But I want you to understand that I'm not approaching this blindly. Forgive the expression. He chuckled softly at her wordplay. I know there would be challenges, she continued. I know I would need to learn new skills, adapt to unfamiliar surroundings, perhaps find creative solutions to tasks that others take for granted. But I'm not afraid of that work. I've been doing it my entire adult life. What about the isolation? James asked. In Boston, you had your sister, your students, neighbors close at hand. Here, our nearest neighbor is 2 miles away. In winter, we can be snowed in for days. Isolation isn't measured only in distance, Catherine replied. I've felt more isolated in a crowded Boston parlor than I have since arriving in Riverdale. Connection comes from being truly seen and understood. She smiled softly. Your letters saw me more clearly than most people who have known me for years. James was quiet, considering her words. The twins had tired of their game and climbed onto the porch, settling on either side of Catherine on the bench. Will you tell us a story, Miss Mitchell? Matthew asked, leaning against her arm. What kind of story would you like? One with adventure, Michael requested, and maybe a bear. And a hero, Matthew added. Catherine thought for a moment, then began a tale of a brave young boy lost in the mountains who befriended a bear cub, only to find himself having to protect it from hunters. The story was simple but engaging, and the twins listened raptly, occasionally asking questions or suggesting what should happen next. James watched them, his heart conflicted. The scene before him was so natural, so right. Catherine with his sons, their easy affection for her, her gentle way with them, yet the practical challenges remained. How would she manage the everyday tasks of ranch life? How would she navigate the dangers? How could he ask her to leave behind everything familiar for this uncertain future? As Catherine's story concluded with the boy safely home and the bear cub reunited with its mother, the sun was setting, painting the sky in colors she couldn't see, but had described beautifully in her letters. Crimson and gold, fading to purple. It's getting late, James said reluctantly. We should get you back to town before it's fully dark. The twins protested, but Catherine gently reminded them that she would see them again soon. Besides, she added, your father reads to you every night, doesn't he? It's important to maintain traditions. This reasonable approach mollified them, and after heartfelt goodbyes, including exuberant hugs that nearly knocked Catherine off balance, James helped her into the wagon for the journey back to Riverdale. They rode in companionable silence for a time, each lost in their own thoughts. The air had cooled considerably with the setting sun, and James draped a blanket over Catherine's lap. Thank you for today, she said, for allowing me into your home, introducing me to your life here. Thank you for coming, he replied. The boys haven't been this animated well, since before Sarah died. They're wonderful children. You've done an admirable job raising them alone. James sighed. I've done my best. But there are things they need that I can't provide. A gentler perspective. Someone who understands emotions better than I do. Sarah was like that. She could read people, know what they needed even before they did. That's a rare gift, Catherine observed. Yes, and I see something similar in you. The way you listen, truly listen, to the boys. The way you respond to what they're really asking, not just their words. Catherine smiled, touched by the observation. Perhaps it comes from relying on what people say rather than their expressions. I've learned to hear the nuances in voices. They lapsed into silence again, the rhythmic clop of the horse's hooves and the creak of the wagon, the only sounds. Finally, as the lights of Riverdale came into view, James spoke again. Catherine, I've been thinking about our arrangement, the 2-week period for us to get to know each other. Her heart tightened. Yes? We're nearly halfway through that time, and I find myself… He paused, searching for words. I find myself dreading its end, regardless of the decision we reach. What are you saying, James? I'm saying that perhaps 2 weeks isn't sufficient. Perhaps we need more time to truly understand if we could work. Hope fluttered in Catherine's chest. What do you propose? Stay through the summer, he suggested. Not as my wife, not yet. But as a guest of the town. Continue teaching Mrs. Winter's students. Visit the ranch regularly, spend time with the boys. Let us all adjust to the idea more gradually. And at the end of summer? At the end of summer, we'll know whether what we felt through our letters can translate to a life together. Whether the practical challenges can be overcome. Whether this mistake was perhaps not a mistake at all, but providence. Quote, Catherine considered his proposal, the practical part of her mind, the part that had helped her survive and thrive despite her blindness, noted the financial implications, the delayed decision, the continued uncertainty. But her heart, which had led her to respond to a letter never meant for her, urged her to accept. I would need to find more permanent lodgings, she said thoughtfully. The boarding house is expensive for a long-term stay. Mrs. Winters has been looking for a companion, James replied. Someone to help with household tasks in exchange for room and board. I took the liberty of speaking with her, and she's eager to have you, if you're amenable. Catherine smiled. You've thought this through. I've tried to, he admitted, though I find my thoughts are seldom straight when it comes to you, Catherine Mitchell. The warmth in his voice sent a pleasant shiver through her. Then yes, she said. I'll stay through the summer. They had reached the boarding house, and James helped her down from the wagon. Standing close to her on the sidewalk, he took her hand in his. Thank you, he said softly, for your patience with the situation, for your kindness to my boys, for taking a chance on a life so different from what you've known. Thank you, she returned, for not putting me on the first stagecoach back to Boston. He laughed quietly, then to her surprise, raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Catherine. I'll come by tomorrow afternoon. The boys have music lessons, but they've extracted a promise from me that they can visit you afterward. I'll look forward to it, she replied, her hand still tingling from his kiss. As she listened to the wagon pull away, Catherine stood for a moment on the sidewalk, her heart full. The day had been a revelation. The Sullivan ranch with its warmth and simplicity, the twins with their unguarded affection, James with his quiet strength and growing openness. For the first time since arriving in Montana, Catherine allowed herself to truly imagine a future here. Not just a visit, not just an adventure, but a life, a family, a home. The challenges would be real. There would be tasks she couldn't perform, dangers she might not perceive, adjustments large and small. But standing there in the gathering darkness, Catherine Mitchell felt something she hadn't expected to find in this remote frontier town. Possibility. The summer passed in a rhythm that soon became familiar to Catherine. Mornings were devoted to piano lessons at the church, where her student roster had grown to 12. Afternoons often found her at Mrs. Winter's cozy cottage, where she had taken up residence, helping the older woman with household tasks that her arthritic hands made difficult. 3 days a week, James would arrive in town, sometimes with the twins, sometimes alone. They established a routine of sorts, walks through town, picnics by the creek, visits to the ranch where Catherine grew increasingly comfortable navigating the house and immediate surroundings. As June bloomed into July, Catherine found herself spending more time at the Sullivan ranch. James had arranged for the piano to be tuned, and she began teaching the twins basic lessons. They were quick learners, their small fingers awkward but determined on the keys. They never showed interest when Sarah tried to teach them. James observed one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, listening to the boys practice inside. Too young then, I suppose. Or perhaps they just needed the right motivation, Catherine suggested. They seem eager to impress you. Me? I think it's you they're trying to impress. Catherine smiled. Either way, music is a gift that will stay with them their whole lives. It's a joy to share it with them. On Sundays, Catherine joined the Sullivans for church, sitting beside them in what had become their usual pew. The congregation had grown accustomed to her presence, and Catherine had formed friendships with several of the women, particularly Ada Peterson, who had become a staunch supporter. James Sullivan has been walking around with half a heart since Sarah died, Ada confided to Catherine over tea one afternoon. The first time I saw him smile, really smile, after her passing was when he was reading one of your letters. The revelation warmed Catherine deeply. His letters meant a great deal to me as well. Then don't let fear stop either of you, Ada advised bluntly. Life's too short and too hard out here to waste chances at happiness. By August, Catherine had proven herself more capable around the ranch than perhaps even she had expected. She had learned to navigate the house and yard independently, to milk the patient old cow James kept for fresh dairy, to tend the kitchen garden with its herbs and vegetables. She couldn't see the plants, but her sensitive fingers could distinguish weeds from seedlings, and she followed neat rows James had laid out with strings specifically for her benefit. The twins had taken to her completely, seeking her out for comfort after minor injuries, asking her advice on important matters such as whether frogs could feel sad, and if stars were really angels watching over them. They still called her Miss Mitchell, but sometimes when sleepy or excited, they slipped and called her Ma, moments that caught everyone by surprise and were quickly glossed over, though they left Catherine's heart aching with longing. James, for his part, had grown increasingly attentive. His initial reserve had melted away, replaced by a warmth that reminded Catherine of his letters. He began to share more of himself. Stories of his childhood in Pennsylvania, his early struggles in Montana, his dreams for the ranch and his sons. And he asked questions about her life, genuinely interested in understanding how she experienced the world. One evening in late August, as summer began its subtle shift toward autumn, James invited Catherine for a special dinner at the ranch. The twins would be staying with the Petersons, he explained, just the two of them. Catherine dressed with particular care, choosing a sage green dress that Mrs. Winters assured her brought out the warmth in her complexion. Her heart fluttered with anticipation as James's wagon arrived at the cottage to collect her. "You look beautiful," he said as he helped her up to the seat. "Thank you," she replied, touching her hair self-consciously. "Is this a special occasion?" "In a way," he said cryptically. "You'll see." When they reached the ranch, James guided her not to the house but down a path she hadn't taken before. "Where are we going?" she asked, curious. "I have something to show you," he replied. "It's a bit of a walk." "Is that all right?" "Of course." They walked for perhaps 10 minutes, James describing the surroundings as they went. The path led away from the main ranch buildings, following the creek upstream. The ground rose gently, and Catherine could smell pine trees and wildflowers. Finally, they stopped. "We're here," James said, a note of nervous anticipation in his voice. "And where is?" "Here." "Exactly?" Catherine asked, smiling. "A clearing by the creek, at the edge of a stand of pines. There's a view of the whole valley from here. The ranch, the distant mountains. It was Sarah's favorite spot." Catherine sobered, understanding the significance. "Thank you for bringing me here." "I've never brought anyone else," James admitted, "but I wanted you to experience it, even if you can't see it the way I do. Listen." Catherine tilted her head, focusing on the sounds around them. The creek burbled more energetically here, tumbling over rocks. Wind whispered through pine needles. Birds called to each other in the canopy above. And below it all, a profound sense of peace. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I've brought a picnic," James told her. "Nothing fancy, but I thought we could eat here." He spread a blanket on the ground and helped Catherine sit, then unpacked a basket containing bread, cheese, cold chicken, and a bottle of wine. Luxuries rarely seen at the ranch. As they ate, they talked easily, comfortably, about everything and nothing. The twins progress with their piano lessons. The new foal born last week. The approaching harvest festival in Riverdale. When they had finished eating, James grew quiet. Catherine could sense a shift in his mood, a tension that hadn't been there before. "James, is something wrong?" "No," he said quickly. "No, nothing's wrong. I'm just nervous, I suppose." "Nervous? Why?" He took a deep breath. "Catherine, summer is almost over. We agreed to use this time to determine if what we felt through our letters could translate to a life together. If the practical challenges could be overcome." Catherine's heart began to pound. "Yes, we did. I've watched you these past months. I've seen your determination, your adaptability, your gentle strength. I've seen how you've made a place for yourself in Riverdale, in our lives." He paused. "The boys adore you. They ask every day when you're coming to visit next." They've started referring to their room as our room for when Miss Mitchell stays over. "They're precious children," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I—" James hesitated. "Catherine, I need to be honest with you. When I placed that advertisement, I was looking for a practical arrangement, someone to help with the ranch, to be a mother to my boys. I thought perhaps affection might grow in time, but I wasn't looking for—" "For what, James?" Catherine prompted gently when he faltered. "For love," he finished simply. "I wasn't looking for love. I thought that part of my life was over when Sarah died." Catherine held her breath, hardly daring to hope. "But then your letters came," James continued, "and something awakened in me that I thought was gone forever. Your words touched something in my soul, Catherine. And these past months, getting to know you in person, your courage, your kindness, your music, your laughter, I find myself falling more deeply every day." He took her hands in his. "I know it won't always be easy. There will be challenges we haven't even anticipated yet. But I know that together we can face whatever comes." "James," Catherine whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I brought you to this spot because it's where I've done my most important thinking over the years. It's where I decided to stay and build the ranch after Sarah died, rather than returning east as my parents wanted. It's where I decided to place that advertisement for a wife. And it's where, these past weeks, I've come to think about us, about our future." She felt him shift, and then his hands released hers. A moment later, he spoke again, his voice coming from lower down. He had knelt before her. "Catherine Mitchell, will you marry me? Will you be a mother to my sons, a partner in this ranch, my companion through whatever life brings us? Will you allow me to love you, support you, stand beside you for all our days?" Tears flowed freely down Catherine's cheeks now. The proposal was everything she hadn't dared to hope for when she first responded to a letter never meant for her. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun with a simple mistake, a crossed correspondence that had somehow led her exactly where she needed to be. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, James Sullivan, I will marry you." His hands cradled her face, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. Then he leaned forward and kissed her, their first kiss, sweet and tender and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, James rested his forehead against hers. "God sent me exactly what I needed," he murmured. "Not what I thought I wanted, but precisely what I needed." "And me as well," Catherine replied softly. "I came west seeking a new beginning, never imagining it would be like this." Later, as they walked hand in hand back toward the ranch house, their home, now and for all the days to come, Catherine reflected on the strange, wonderful path that had led her here. A mistaken letter, a crossed correspondence, a blind woman and a widower finding in each other exactly what they needed, though neither had known to look for it. Some might call it coincidence. But as the Montana twilight settled around them, Catherine Mitchell knew better. She called it providence. The news of their engagement spread through Riverdale like wildfire. By the following morning, visitors began arriving at Mrs. Winter's cottage, women bearing pies and good wishes, men offering congratulations to James when they encountered him in town. Reverend Thomas appeared personally, beaming with satisfaction, as if he'd orchestrated the match himself. "I knew the Lord had a plan when you stepped off that stagecoach," he told Catherine. Though I confess even I couldn't have predicted such a perfect outcome from such an unusual beginning. Catherine accepted the community's enthusiasm with grace, though she found herself occasionally overwhelmed by the attention. In Boston, her social circle had been small and carefully cultivated over years. Here in Riverdale, she'd become a central character in the town's ongoing story within months. "It's always like this," Mrs. Winters explained when Catherine expressed surprise at the steady stream of well-wishers. "Out here, every marriage, every birth, every milestone is celebrated by all. We're too few and the land too harsh for anything else." The twins. Reaction to the news surpassed even the town's excitement. James had taken them fishing the morning after the proposal, explaining carefully that he had asked Miss Mitchell to marry him, to become their mother. "Both of you need to understand that this is an important decision," he'd told them. "If you have any worries or questions, now is the time to tell me." According to James, the boys had exchanged one of their mysterious twin glances. Then Michael, as usual speaking for both, asked seriously, "Does this mean Miss Mitchell will live with us forever?" When James confirmed this, the boys had whooped with such enthusiasm that they'd scared away all the fish. Their only concern, it emerged, was whether they would have to stop calling her Miss Mitchell and start using Mother immediately. "We never had a ma we can remember," Matthew had explained, "so we don't know how to do it proper." James had assured them that they could take their time, that Catherine wouldn't mind however they chose to address her. When James recounted this conversation to Catherine that evening as they sat on Mrs. Winters' porch swing, she had to blink back tears. "They're such dear boys," she said. "I hope I can be the mother they deserve." "You already are," James replied, squeezing her hand. "The way you listen to them, encourage them, guide them without constraining them, Sarah would have approved." The mention of his late wife, far from casting a shadow over their happiness, felt right to Catherine. Sarah would always be part of their family story, the mother of the twins, James's first love. Catherine had no desire to erase that history or to replace those memories. "I think," she said thoughtfully, "that we should keep a portrait of Sarah in the house. The boys should know their mother's face, even if I can't see it myself." Quote. James was quiet for a moment, then kissed her temple softly. "You are an extraordinary woman, Catherine Mitchell." "Soon to be Sullivan," she reminded him with a smile. They set the wedding date for October 1st, giving them 6 weeks to prepare. It was a practical choice, after the harvest, but before the first snows typically arrived. Mrs. Winters and Ada Peterson immediately took charge of arrangements, debating everything from the wedding feast to Catherine's dress with an enthusiasm that both amused and touched the bride-to-be. Nothing too elaborate. Catherine insisted when the women began discussing ordering fabric from Helena. "Something simple and practical that I can wear again." Ada snorted. "Practical," she says, as if a woman's wedding day is about practicality. In the end, they compromised. The dress would be made from fine cream-colored wool that could indeed be worn again, but with special touches, delicate embroidery around the collar and cuffs, tiny pearl buttons down the back, a satin sash at the waist. "You'll be the most beautiful bride Riverdale has ever seen," Mrs. Winters declared after the final fitting. "I just hope I don't trip walking down the aisle," Catherine replied, only half joking. The church would be familiar enough, but she would be nervous, and nervousness sometimes interfered with her careful mental mapping. "James won't let that happen," Ada assured her. "That man looks at you like you're the sunrise after the longest night." As the wedding approached, Catherine found herself increasingly busy. Beyond the normal preparations, she was determined to be as ready as possible for her new life at the ranch. She spent more time there, learning the rhythms of daily life, the location of every cupboard and drawer in the kitchen, the number of steps from the house to the barn, to the chicken coop, to the vegetable garden. James watched her methodical preparations with admiration and occasional concern. "You don't have to master everything before the wedding," he told her one evening as she practiced carrying water from the pump without spilling. "We have time." "I know," Catherine acknowledged, "but I want our beginning to be as smooth as possible. For all of us." She paused, then added more quietly, "And I want to prove, to myself as much as anyone, that I can do this." James took the bucket from her hands and set it down, then wrapped his arms around her. "You have nothing to prove, Catherine. Not to me, not to the boys, not to anyone in town. You've already shown more courage and determination than most people will in a lifetime." She leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his steadiness. "Thank you for that. But please understand, I need to do this for myself. My whole life I've had to work twice as hard to be considered half as capable. I don't resent it anymore. It's simply my reality. And I want to enter our marriage as your equal partner, not someone who needs constant assistance." James held her tighter. "You are already my equal, my superior in many ways. But I understand. Just remember that asking for help isn't weakness. Out here, everyone depends on each other sometimes. It's how we survive." 2 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived from Catherine's sister in Philadelphia. She had written immediately after accepting James's proposal, but the postal service to the Montana Territory was notoriously unreliable. Mrs. Winters read the letter aloud to Catherine, who sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, anxious to hear her only family's response to her news. "My dearest Catherine," the letter began, "your news has left me astonished but ultimately delighted. While I confess to initial alarm at the unusual circumstances of your meeting, Mr. Sullivan, your description of him and his sons warms my heart. You have always had exceptional judgment of character, blindness notwithstanding, and if you have found love in this unexpected place, I can only rejoice for you." Catherine released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The letter continued with news from Philadelphia, inquiries about the wedding plans, and finally, "I have spoken with Robert, and we have decided that we cannot allow you to marry without family present. We will be departing Philadelphia on the 15th and should arrive in Riverdale by the 28th, barring any delays. I can hardly wait to meet the man who has captured my sister's heart through the power of his words alone, and the boys who will soon be my nephews. All my love, Eleanor." Quote, "Oh," Catherine exclaimed, tears springing to her eyes. "They're coming!" "I never dared hope. The journey is so long and expensive, and with the baby. Family should be present at weddings," Mrs. Winters said firmly. "I'm glad your sister understands that." Catherine had resigned herself to a wedding without family, focusing instead on the community that had embraced her in Riverdale. The knowledge that Eleanor and Robert would be there after all felt like the final piece falling into place. When she told James the news that afternoon, his response surprised her. "I've already arranged for them to stay at the ranch," he admitted. "I wrote to your sister the day after you accepted my proposal, inviting them to come. I hoped it would be a surprise." Deeply touched, Catherine reached up to cup his face. "You wonderful man. You thought of everything." "I want our wedding day to be perfect for you," he said simply. "You deserve nothing less." The remaining days before the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Final preparations for the ceremony and feast, last arrangements at the ranch to accommodate Eleanor and Robert, and regular lessons for Catherine's piano students, who were preparing a special musical tribute for the ceremony. Through it all, Catherine maintained a sense of wonder at the turn her life had taken. Less than a year ago, she had been a solitary piano teacher in Boston, resigned to a quiet life of independence but essential solitude. Now she stood on the threshold of a new life as a wife, a mother, a true partner. The path had been unexpected, marked by a simple postal error that had somehow led to exactly where she needed to be. Eleanor and Robert arrived right on schedule, 3 days before the wedding. The stagecoach delivered them to Riverdale in the late afternoon, and James brought Catherine to meet them. The reunion between the sisters was emotional, both women crying and laughing as they embraced for the first time in nearly 6 months. "Let me look at you," Eleanor said, holding Catherine at arm's length. "You're positively radiant. Montana clearly agrees with you." "It's not Montana," Catherine replied with a smile. "It's happiness." Eleanor then turned to James, studying him with the protective scrutiny of an older sister. "So you're the man who's been writing such beautiful letters to my sister." "Not intentionally at first," James admitted with a rueful smile. "But I'm grateful every day for that mistake." "As well you should be," Eleanor said, but her tone was warm. "Catherine is extraordinary. Believe me, I know." Catherine introduced Eleanor and Robert to the twins, who were initially shy but quickly warmed up when they discovered Robert had brought them small, carved wooden animals all the way from Philadelphia. That evening, as they all gathered for dinner at the ranch, Catherine's first meal cooked in what would soon be her kitchen, she was struck by how natural it felt. Her sister and brother-in-law blended seamlessly with James and the boys, creating a sense of family that extended beyond blood ties. "You cook quite well for a blind woman," Eleanor observed as they cleaned up afterward, the men and boys having been shooed outside. "Necessity is a powerful teacher," Catherine replied, "though I still have much to learn about cooking on a wood stove. It's quite different from the coal range I had in Boston." "Are you truly happy here?" Eleanor asked more seriously. "This life is so different from everything you've known." Catherine considered the question, wanting to give her sister a truthful answer. "I am," she said finally. "Happier than I ever expected to be. It's not easy. There are daily challenges, moments of frustration when my blindness makes things more difficult. But James never makes me feel less capable. He helps when I need it, steps back when I don't. And the boys," she smiled, "the boys treat my blindness as simply another fact about me, like the color of my hair or my ability to play piano. And the town? The isolation? Riverdale isn't Boston, but it has a warmth, a sense of community I never found in the city. As for isolation," Catherine shrugged, "I'm less isolated here, surrounded by people who truly see me, than I often felt in crowded Boston drawing rooms where people spoke around me rather than to me." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then Catherine felt her sister's arms encircle her. "Then I'm happy for you. All I've ever wanted was for you to find your place in the world, on your own terms." "I have," Catherine whispered, "though I never expected to find it through a misdirected letter." The day before the wedding, Catherine visited the ranch early. There were final preparations to make, and she wanted time alone in what would soon be her home. James had taken the boys into town for haircuts and last-minute errands, leaving her to explore and reflect. She moved through the rooms slowly, her fingers trailing along familiar surfaces: the smooth wooden table where they would share meals, the leather sofa where the boys liked to sit for their reading time, the piano that had been silent for so long but now rang with music several times a week. Upstairs, she visited the twins' room, smiling at the slight scent of little boy, a mixture of dirt, pine sap, and the lavender soap Ada insisted they use. Their small clothes were folded neatly in the dresser, their boots lined up by the door. She had helped them clean and organize the room yesterday, preparing for Eleanor and Robert's stay in the guest room across the hall. Finally, she entered what would be her and James's bedroom. She had been in this room before, but always briefly, always with a sense of it being his private space. Now she took her time, exploring more thoroughly. The bed was substantial, with a headboard James had carved himself. The quilt was one Sarah had made. James had told her, blues and greens in a simple pattern. Catherine had run her fingers over the stitching, appreciating the care that had gone into it. She had suggested they might put it away if it made him uncomfortable, but James had been firm. "It's part of our history. I think Sarah would be pleased to know it's still keeping us warm." A dresser stood against one wall, and Catherine opened the drawers James had emptied for her things. She had packed most of her belongings already, ready to be brought over after the wedding. The closet still held some of Sarah's dresses that James hadn't been able to part with. These, they had agreed, would be stored in trunks in the attic, preserved for the twins to see someday, but not a daily reminder. On the bedside table, Catherine found the small music box her father had given her. James must have brought it from Mrs. Winter's cottage earlier. She wound it and let the familiar melody of Fur Elise fill the room. It would be the last thing she heard each night, a connection to her past as she embraced her future. Standing there in the quiet house, Catherine felt a profound sense of rightness. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. James Sullivan. She would officially become mother to Michael and Matthew. She would begin a new chapter in a life that had already contained more unexpected turns than most. The day of the wedding dawned clear and crisp, with the first hint of autumn in the air. Eleanor helped Catherine dress in the cream-colored wool gown, arranging her dark hair in a simple but elegant style, adorned with small white flowers from Mrs. Winter's garden. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "Father would have been so proud." "I wish he could be here," Catherine admitted. "He always believed I would find my way, even when others doubted." "He's here in spirit," Eleanor assured her, "and I think he would have approved of James. He's a good man, steady and true." "Yes," Catherine agreed softly. "He is." The church was packed when Robert escorted Catherine down the aisle. Though she couldn't see the gathered townspeople, she could feel their presence, hear their murmured appreciations as she passed. James waited at the altar, and when she reached him, he took her hands in his. "You're radiant," he whispered, loud enough for only her to hear. Reverend Thomas conducted the ceremony with warmth and sincerity. When he came to the traditional questions, he had modified them slightly at Catherine's request. "James Sullivan, do you take Catherine Mitchell to be your lawfully wedded wife, to live together in holy matrimony? Do you promise to love her, comfort her, honor and keep her, in sickness and in health, in hardship and in ease, and forsaking all others, keep yourself only unto her, so long as you both shall live?" "I do," James replied, his voice strong and sure. "Catherine Mitchell, do you take James Sullivan to be your lawfully wedded husband, to live together in holy matrimony? Do you promise to love him, comfort him, honor and keep him, in sickness and in health, in hardship and in ease, and forsaking all others, keep yourself only unto him, so long as you both shall live?" "I do," Catherine said clearly. They had chosen to write their own vows in addition to the traditional promises. James spoke first, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Catherine, when I wrote that first letter, I was a man seeking practical arrangement. I never imagined I would find a true partner, a woman whose strength and grace would inspire me daily. You came into our lives unexpectedly, yet it feels as if you were always meant to be here. I promise to walk beside you, not ahead or behind, to support you without diminishing you, to cherish every day we're granted together, and to remind you, whenever you might doubt it, that you are exactly where you belong." Catherine blinked back tears as she began her own vows. "James, I responded to your letter on impulse, never imagining where that single decision would lead. In your words, I found understanding. In your presence, I found strength. In your love, I found home. I promise to face whatever challenges come our way with courage and determination, to fill our house with music and laughter, to love your sons as my own, and to remember always that the greatest journeys often begin with the smallest missteps." When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, James's kiss was gentle but filled with promise. The congregation erupted in applause, and Catherine could hear the twins cheering loudest of all. The celebration afterward was everything a frontier wedding should be: abundant food, music from local fiddle players, dancing that continued well into the evening. Catherine's piano students performed the piece they had prepared, a simple but lovely arrangement of Beautiful Dreamer that brought tears to her eyes. The twins stayed close to Catherine throughout the celebration, occasionally touching her hand or dress as if to reassure themselves that she was really there, really theirs now. "Are you our mother for true?" Matthew asked during a quiet moment. "Yes," Catherine replied, kneeling to their level despite her fine dress. "For true and forever." "Can we call you Ma now?" Michael asked. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," she told them. "Ma, Mother, Catherine. What matters is that we're family now." The boys exchanged one of their silent communications. Then Matthew said solemnly, "We think Ma is best. It's shorter for if we need to yell for you if there's a snake." Catherine laughed, pulling them both into a hug. "Very practical." "Ma it is, then." As the celebration wound down, James found her sitting with the sleeping twins, one leaning against each side of her. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Sullivan?" he asked softly. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through her. "Yes," she replied. "I'm ready." They said their goodbyes, accepted final congratulations and well wishes, and finally climbed into the wagon for the journey to the ranch, to home. The twins, drowsy but determined to stay awake, sat between them on the bench. "Did you like the party, Ma?" Michael asked, using the new title with obvious pleasure. "It was perfect," Catherine assured him. "The best wedding I could have imagined." "Even though you couldn't see it?" Matthew asked with a child's directness. "I saw it in my own way," she explained, "through sounds and touches and feelings. Sometimes those ways of seeing reveal more truth than eyes ever could." At the ranch, they tucked the twins into bed together, their excitement finally overcome by exhaustion. Catherine sang them a lullaby, her voice soft in the quiet room, while James watched from the doorway. When the boys were asleep, James led Catherine to their bedroom. The space felt different now, not his room that she was visiting, but their shared sanctuary. "Welcome home, Catherine Sullivan," he said, drawing her into his arms. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, James's arms around her and his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. A misdirected letter, a mistaken identity, a leap of faith that had led to love. "What are you thinking?" James asked, his voice low in the darkness. "I'm thinking about how often in life the things we perceive as mistakes or obstacles turn out to be blessings in disguise," she replied. "If I hadn't lost my sight, I might never have developed the skill to hear the truth in people's voices. If your letter hadn't gone astray, we would never have found each other." "God's ways are mysterious indeed," James agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "But I'm grateful for each step that led us here, even the painful ones." "As am I," Catherine murmured, settling more comfortably against him. The years that followed would bring challenges, as they had known they would. The harsh Montana winter tested Catherine's adaptability. Spring brought flooding that threatened the lower pastures. Summer brought a brief illness that confined Catherine to bed for weeks, leaving James to manage both ranch and children alone. But there were far more joys than hardships. The twins thrived under Catherine's guidance, growing into thoughtful, confident boys who excelled at both their studies and ranch work. Their piano playing progressed to the point where Catherine arranged small recitals for the community, bringing culture to Riverdale in a way it had never experienced before. The following spring brought a daughter, Eleanor Sarah Sullivan, born during a gentle April rain. The little girl inherited her mother's musical talent and her father's steady determination. She grew up never questioning that her mother's blindness was simply another facet of her, like her musical ability or her talent for storytelling. When visitors came to the Sullivan Ranch, they often remarked on the unusual harmony of the household. The blind woman who moved confidently through her domain, the children who instinctively cleared paths and described sights without being asked, the husband whose quiet support never crossed the line into overprotection. "How do you make it work so well?" Ada Peterson asked Catherine once, watching her efficiently prepared dinner while supervising the twins, homework and bouncing baby Eleanor on her hip. Catherine had smiled, thinking of that first misdirected letter and all that had followed. "By remembering that what looks like a mistake might actually be exactly what you need," she replied. "And by trusting that with enough love and determination you can overcome any obstacle." On their 5th wedding anniversary, James presented Catherine with a special gift, a new piano for the church, replacing the aging instrument she had played since her arrival. The entire town gathered for its dedication, and Catherine played a piece she had composed herself, titled simply, "Providence." As the final notes faded, James leaned close to whisper in her ear, "When I placed that advertisement for a mail-order bride, I asked for someone practical, capable, healthy. God sent me a blind piano teacher from Boston who has brought more joy to our lives than I ever dreamed possible." Catherine smiled, reaching for his hand. "Sometimes," she replied, "we get exactly what we need, even when it's nothing like what we thought we wanted." And in that simple truth lay the miracle of their story, a blind mail-order bride who arrived by mistake, and the widower who recognized, despite his initial doubts, that God had sent him exactly what he needed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.